Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout-out to...
Something else.
Something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matan, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 094 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we take a look at both Mid-South Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling from 41 years and 1 day ago, May 21st, 1983. My name is Aria, and welcome to the show. Now, I've been promising, threatening for a few weeks that we have some surprises on this show coming up in preparation for our 100th episode coming up sooner rather than later. And let's go to one of them right now. We have, for at least 1 week only, a brand new co-host on this here program. Co-host, introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Trae. I've been a lot of things. I've never been a threat fulfilled before. That's exciting.
There you go. Now, have you been a wrestling fan for very long?
25 years this October.
Damn, that is a while. And you remember what got you into wrestling?
It was 1999. It was the height of the Attitude Era. Everybody talked about wrestling, and just one night I was a big Walker Texas Ranger fan growing up, and if you remember in the 90s, that was the it would be a Walker Texas Ranger rerun on USA right before Raw. So one Monday night I was watching Walker Texas Ranger. I see the preview from Raw, and I just decided, well, let me see what this is all about, and something clicked. And I've been with it ever since. Which, if you look at the first Raw that I watched, it makes no sense. Like it was the episode of Raw where the Rock Bottom Davey Boy Smith on a tray of dog shit. So I don't know what kept me, but I've been here ever since.
See, I don't know if that's going to be good luck or bad luck because my former co-host KJ, he started watching SmackDown when it got on Fox. And the first angle he remembers is Baron Corbin throwing dog food at Roman Reigns. So I apparently am just stuck with one way to find co-hosts, I guess. Now, on this show, we talk about 41-year-old wrestling, Mid-South Wrestling, and World Class specifically. Were you very familiar with these products before I arm-twisted you to joining the podcasting network?
So I have not watched a lot. I kind of, at one point, I started going through the Mid-South TV that's available, starting in late 81. And then I didn't get that far into it just because of life stuff. And I keep telling myself, one day I'm going to go through all that stuff. But I actually grew up in sort of rural Southeast Arkansas, which was... I actually grew up in what had been the Mid-South Territory. It's like the territories were dying by the time I was born, but it was that area. So when I was like young and a teenager, whenever wrestling would come up with older people, it was Mid-South wrestling that they remembered. So I feel like I have a cultural link to Mid-South. Mm-hmm. And then now I live in Texas, so I guess I also have something of a link to World Class, although I live in Houston, and so it's maybe more Paul Bosch than the Von Erichs. But this is I love Southern wrestling. I want to get more into it. So yeah, I'm excited for this.
I don't think there wasn't anything from Houston this week, but Bill Watts is running the Houston territory at this point. So we do semi-regularly see Houston stuff on this show. So you've got a link to everything we're doing. Throw in some
Cool.
East Tennessee stuff and, the Smoky Mountain stuff will be, old hat for you.
Yeah, the what's that building called? What did it used to be called? The Summit in Houston.
Okay.
I got to tell you, it breaks my heart whenever I drive by that building. But you know what it is now?
Is it the Toyota Center or is it something else?
No, the Toyota Center is downtown. It's a newer arena. What used to be the Houston Summit is now Joel Osteen's church.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Literally.
Exactly. And that's exactly how what used to be a bastion of good, decent professional wrestling is now just used for terrible things.
As long as you ignore the 1989 Royal Rumble, because that was terrible in a different way. So let's dive into Mid-South Wrestling first. May 21st, 1983, from the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. We're going to play the intro first with Boyd Pierce and Bill Watts. They're going to tell us everything we're going to hear on this week's program, or watch on this week's program. Hearing it would be weird.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television Network. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, and we have a lot of excitement for you. Tag team action, you're going to see the Super Destroyer and his partner, Tony Zale, as they take on the popular combination of the Junkyard Dog and Hacksaw Butch Reed. Another wild battle. Hacksaw Jim Duggan will be in the ring against a rugged Canadian star who made his debut here last week, Butcher Paul Vachon. We have a lot of exciting action coming up, and to tell you about it, our guest commentator, a man who needs no introduction to any of us in professional wrestling, Cowboy Bill Watts. Bill?
Well, thank you, Boyd. We just had some news that the Sangee Team Club voted the Junkyard Dog over Michael Spinks as the man they would most like to have at their big event at the Rivergate. And I understand that Grizzly Smith and the officials at Mid-South are trying to adjust his schedule so that he can be there. But that's a great honor, and that just shows you the tremendous pride and the accolades that have come to the Junkyard Dog, because he always gives his all for the people. And we've got a great family in wrestling, the Von Erich family, and in the 16th of April at the Superdome, they wrestled the Freebirds, Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts. Let's watch the edited highlights.
So we'll go to that in a second here. But, so this week it is the popular duo teaming up for the first time ever. So how popular is this duo? Junkyard Dog and Butch Reed versus Super Destroyer and Tony Zane. Not to be confused with Tony Zale, as given us by Boyd there. And plus, we have Butcher Vachon, who, yes, is going to be on every show we do for what feels like, the next month. He debuted on both shows last week, and now this week, he's on both shows again. By the way, I do want to note, and I know you didn't watch last week's show, but last week during the intro, they told us that some other club had invited Junkyard Dog, but his schedule was just way too busy for them to try to do anything about. However, I guess the Sangee Club, something about them made it okay, and they're turning Dog's schedule upside down to get him to go there.
That Junkyard Dog is much beloved in the Mid-South area. Like I said, I grew up in the area. I spent most of my formative years in southern Arkansas, northern Louisiana, and that's still like the first person that comes to mind when you mention pro wrestling to a lot of people from that area is Junkyard Dog.
And it's always important to remember that, like, people aren't remembering the WWF Junkyard Dog, and they're sure as hell not remembering the WCW Junkyard Dog.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's like, this Junkyard Dog, at this point he is starting to put on a little bit of weight, but like, he's still, for all things considered, he's still svelte by Junkyard Dog standards, or later Junkyard Dog standards. And these people just love him. And that's one of the things about territory wrestling, is not only is it all different, everybody has their own local hero that they embrace, even if it doesn't make sense to other local territories.
Yeah, again, growing up in Arkansas, it's Arkansas was kind of divided. Most of the state was Mid-South, but there's a sliver of Eastern Arkansas. So I knew one of my best friend's moms growing up had grown up in like West Memphis area. So it wasn't Junkyard Dog for her, it was Jerry Lawler. So, it's Yeah, like I said, it's interesting that everybody in the territory days had their wrestling and their heroes.
Yep. And of course, anytime I hear West Memphis, I think of Sid, but
Yes,
he's probably not too many people's hero. Probably. So we go.
definitely the most famous. I'm sorry, definitely the most famous pro wrestler to come from Arkansas, Sid.
Are there that many others like that? I'm sure there's local
I
indie wrestlers, but
I can't think of another famous one. Some of the Memphis and Mid South job guys, but I can't. The Godwins were announced from Arkansas. I don't know if either of them were actually from Arkansas.
and even if they are, I mean, I would still say Sid is more famous than them.
Oh, absolutely.
So from here, Bill pitches at the highlights of a match we may have seen before on this show. David and Kerry Von Erich versus Buddy Roberts and Terry Gordy. Now this is from the Superdome. This isn't from like the Sportatorium or anything like that. And they mentioned that this was when Kerry flew in from Japan for this match. We had a four-way breakout, and the referee didn't seem to mind. Watts said if the Von Erichs win here, they'll move up the rankings for a Mid-South Tag Team title match. And I guess we have to redo the rankings because Kerry pinned Roberts after a double atomic drop.
Yeah.
Hmm?
So I wanted to look up Kerry's Japan tour and see if there was anything interesting, and I ended up not having time. But yeah, apparently he's just off the plane, which is interesting because I wonder was Gordy working for All Japan yet?
That I'm not sure of. I'd say probably, but um, and it's funny because over on the world class side, we'd known about this Japanese tour for a while because Bill Mercer kept telling us that Kerry was participating in the national tournament in Japan, where only two Americans have ever been invited, him and Fritz. Now, what national tournament is he talking about? Who knows? And also,
Given that it's May, I'm gonna guess it was the Champion Carnival.
that would have been my guess, yeah, and also more of the only two Americans have ever been invited to that tournament. I don't know about that.
And I am rather certain that is incorrect. Do you remember the one time that you and I met in person?
You're gonna make me feel bad because no, I don't. Sorry.
We weren't at the Superdome, but we were right next door to the Superdome at Smoothie King Center. It was the Raw after WrestleMania 30,
Okay,
and you don't even remember.
I remember the Raw after WrestleMania 30. I'm assuming we were standing in line.
Yes, we
Okay.
were. We were. Yeah.
I apologize. I'm sorry. Let's hear. For what it's worth, Terry Gordy at least wasn't wrestling in All Japan in 1983. Well, I'm sorry. I lied. He does start wrestling in All Japan in '83, but it's not until August.
No.
So, according to the reliable CageMatch.net, which has multiple times shown me to be a liar. So speaking of the Superdome, Watts then recaps King Kong Bundy versus our old friend Tim Horner at the Superdome, showing us highlights where Bundy wins with a big splash and the 5 count.
Watts made sure to point out. I'm sorry. We have got to get better about not talking over each other. I don't know what's wrong with me.
All good. We got to get on a good rapport here. It's the first show.
I just I hear a pause and I want to start talking.
And then if you don't immediately start talking, then I'm like, okay, I need to start talking. And then we're just talking all over each other.
We'll get the rhythm. We'll get the rhythm.
Yes. So what were you about to say about Watts?
Watts was made sure to talk about how the New York magazines were covering this big Superdome event.
Mm-hmm. I should note, and I'll bring this up because, again, I doubt you're going to go back and just watch months of Mid-South to catch up on this. I don't know about you, but I'd never seen Bundy beat a name wrestler with a 5 count. It's always been jobbers or jobbers that become stars-ish like Horner. But he beat Mr. Wrestling 2 a few weeks ago, and sure, Mr. Olympia came in and screwed 2, but he beat 2 with a 5 count. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Bundy was really like Horner landed like a series of drop kicks, and appreciated the way that Bundy would like register them but not bump for them. Really, really good example of how to sell like a big guy.
And it's one of those things missing from today's wrestling. And I'm going to say this. I'm not as big a fan of modern wrestling as I am with old wrestling, but, everyone today are, much superior athletically than wrestlers back then. However, the one thing missing is an air of invincibility. Like nowadays, everybody, no matter how big, small, wide, skinny, fat you are, everybody essentially does the same shit. And, if you weigh 110 pounds, you can knock down a 400 pounder with ease. It's like, it's nice to go back to this and see it takes effort to knock somebody down. It's not, doesn't just anybody can do it.
Yes. I enjoy modern wrestling and classic wrestling about equally. Like today I went from watching New Japan Best of the Super Junior to watching, Mid-South and World Class, and I enjoyed it all. But when I watch old stuff like this, I do notice a lot of things like that I think need to be brought back.
Well, speaking of things that we didn't need brought back, Tim Horner again. And he's going to be wrestling the Black Ninja Kendo Nagasaki with General Skandor Akbar. Who the fuck did I piss off to get this match? The only way to make this worse would have been if Horner was cutting a promo during the match. So I noted Horner took an ass bump off of a kick to the stomach. Really? They did fuck up the natural bridge, but it was all our good friend Nagasaki's fault. Horner did the roll-up part, and all Nagasaki had to do was roll to his back, and he couldn't even do that right. He somehow managed to land on his stomach. And then Horner gets the upset win with a small package that Nagasaki almost fucked up, but Horner essentially had to do a shoot small package for the win. And as much as I'm not a fan of Tim Horner, the right man definitely won here.
I thought this was a perfectly fine little TV match. I appreciate the charm of the quote unquote scientific babyface wrestler. Arm drags and arm bars all around. Have you noticed? I'm sure you've noticed the graphics on this show. They always have quotation marks around the obvious gimmick names.
Yes. And
that's such a Watts touch.
Oh yeah, and it gets funnier because they'll put the quotes around like Andre the Giant and things like that. And I don't think he's on the show this week, no, but Mr. Wrestling 2 doesn't have quotes around him, indicating his legal name is Mr. Wrestling 2.
I believe it.
Yes.
Watts, during this match, talked about how Mid-South is just the envy of the wrestling world. Georgia might be broadcast all over the country, but everybody knows that Mid-South wrestling has the highest quality of competition.
And at least to the folks in Louisiana, they certainly believed him. By the way, this was Horner's first win against a name opponent. Like the most he'd done before was winning an expiration of time match against another jobber. So they're giving Horner something, although Nagasaki is thankfully on his way out. Believe me, you need to be happy you're coming in at the end of the Kendo Nagasaki run.
Who was this Kendo Nagasaki? Do you know? I want to look it up and I didn't have time.
He, oh my God, he was the Dragon Master in WCW. And he did a few other things, and it's like, his existence has been pissing me off since he arrived.
Not the best Japanese wrestler I've ever seen.
No, and I mean, he's going bald, and they try to say, "Oh, this is an Oriental style haircut." I'm like, if he's doing this on purpose, he's a fucking idiot.
Kazuo Sakurada was the Dragon Master, Kendo Nagasaki.
Yes, the Black Ninja. Like the best thing he did was the video narrated by J.J. Dillon, which he just stood there looking menacing while JJ cut a promo. That was the best thing.
Good finish.
I guess that was the best thing he's done, the 6 months he's been here.
Kazuo Sakurada's biggest contribution to professional wrestling helped train Bret Hart.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, he helped train a great wrestler, so good for him.
Yeah.
So Johnny Rich versus Tony Torres in what would normally be an expiration of time match, but this is the second match of the card, and we have 30 minutes left on the show. So this is another one of those matches where Watts talks about what a great card matchmaker Grizzly Smith has put together, and then he starts talking about everything else in the world, indicating that no, this is not that great of a card. If it was, he'd actually be talking about this match. Now, to build the tag team match later on, Watts says that Tony Zane has never lost on Mid-South TV, and I'm like, okay, I know I'm watching a lot of wrestling, but that's bullshit. So I look it up, and he lost 2 weeks ago to fucking Butch Reed.
Who's
So
gonna remember?
Yeah. Rich ran across the ring to do a cradle to Torres for the win. I didn't have much else to say about this.
Okay, I have two things to say. Number one, I spent most of this match trying to Google if Johnny Rich was really Tommy Rich's brother, and couldn't find anything conclusive. The one source I found said that they were cousins, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I thought they were cousins.
Yeah. Watts did say that Johnny was Tommy's younger brother, so that's why I was curious. I actually thought this finish was really cool. Where the Torres was down and Rich just shot a half Nelson and pinned him. That's another thing that people don't do anymore that they should.
Yeah. Or at least, if you do it a couple times, it'll make people believe that that's a finish. Even if you never do it again, it's like Private Party being the Young Bucks. Sure, the Young Bucks have beaten them 15 times since, but that one time Private Party won, so you kind of get in the back of your head that, hey, it could happen.
Yeah. Well, it not to date the show too much, but on today's Best of the Super Junior show had Kushida and Taiji Ishimori, and they wrestled for about 2.5 minutes, and then Kushida just kind of caught him in a head scissors and pinned him, like that kind of thing. Like every now and then, you need to do one of those flash pins early in the match to educate people that the finish can come at any time.
Now, I gotta ask, because I'm, an Impact Wrestling viewer, was Kushida spitting up the Jonathan Gresham octopus ink during the match?
He was not.
Oh, damn it. Not keeping up with kayfabe, Kushida. It's always lucky that, Nick Nemeth got his ass kicked on Impact a few weeks ago, because that last Impact show that I went to was head-to-head with a New Japan show. So it would have been hard for him to be at both places at once. Thankfully, Moose injured him. Because otherwise, who knows what would have happened.
That was very convenient that he couldn't make that Impact show on the same day as the New Japan show he was already advertised for.
Yes. So then we got North American champion Junkyard Dog and Butch Reed versus Super Destroyer and Tony Zane. Now, before last week, where Destroyer had a quick squash match, the last time we saw him was 6 weeks ago when he formed a brief scumbag alliance with Jim Duggan in one of those things you need to forget because it never happened and will never be talked about again. Anyway, he's now in an alliance with Tony Zane, who's going into this match with 1 TV win, 1 TV loss, and 2 expiration of time limit draws. Dog has his lousy new theme music, Atomic Dog. Don't worry, it doesn't last long.
I wondered what that was. I knew it wasn't Another One Bites the Dust, but I couldn't make out what it was.
Now, this one, I think they use it for like 2 months and then realize that the crowd just not getting into it, and they switch back to Another One Bites the Dust. So Zane does go 50-50 with Reed, and when he tags out, Super D immediately loses the advantage. Dog upends Destroyer. Zane had to tag back in. The faces have a communication error as Destroyer's covering Dog. Reed goes for an elbow drop but hits Dog instead. Ultimately, that doesn't matter because 30 seconds later, Dog pins the undefeated Tony Zane with a thump at the same time as Reed giving Destroyer a top rope shoulder tackle. I guess this makes Dog the Kevin Nash of Mid-South, and Zane could have been Goldberg.
I thought that was a pretty neat little finish with Reed jumping over Dog and Zane and hitting Super Destroyer with a shoulder block. Another thing I wanted to look up, who was this Super Destroyer? Because I think the Super Destroyer in Mid-South was Scott Irwin, but from what I was looking at, it looked like he might have left the territory by now. So was somebody else the Super Destroyer, or was Scott Irwin still keep kicking around here?
Nope, this is Scott Irwin, and he's never been a regular with Mid-South. He'll come in every 3 to 6 months for a TV show or whatnot. Last year, he was in the Superdome challenging for the tag team titles, and really that's about it.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
So then we get Ted DiBiase with General Skandor Akbar versus Ron Ellis. During this match, they announced next week's card, which there's no specific matches, which is probably going to tell you how next week's going to go. But we do have a number of random talents, including Tito Santana making his official TV debut, Mr. Wrestling 2, and King Kong Bundy are here every week. And then, to the shock of approximately no one, DiBiase won with the Power Slam.
You forgot the biggest name is going to be here next week, Mil Mascaras.
Yeah, I was trying to ignore Mil.
Yeah. So DiBiase just fucking mauled this dude with about a dozen knees to the body, and then hit him with a big shot coming off the top rope and got him with a power slam. Entertaining for what it was, I thought.
And, they're slowly building up this DiBiase Duggan feud. And it's funny because nowadays, they were partners for 6 months, and then they broke up. If that happened nowadays, we'd all be whining and bitching about how, oh man, they were only together for 6 months, yada, yada, yada. Like this, they're together 6 months, and to be honest, that was pretty much the perfect amount of time for them to be together before the split, especially since the fans were just really getting behind Duggan, and it was the right choice to split him off and turn him babyface.
Cannot get used to Watts calling him Duggan. I know he always does forever, but it just, it's all I guess ever since when he went to WWF, he was just Duggan ever since, and it's just always weird to watch Mid-South and hear him called Duggan. This is we're building to the big tuxedo steel cage street fight in Houston, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that's for I don't think that's for another year. But I mean, so yes, technically we're building to it, but I think we got a while to go. I could be wrong though. But then I lost my train of thought here, which, happens from time to time. So it doesn't just happen when I'm by myself. It happens when I have, a co-host too.
I would like to help, but I can't think of anything else to say about Jim Duggan.
Oh, there you go. Thank you for, triggering that there for me. So the Jim Duggan thing, that's kind of like a heel thing that started, I think, wherever he was wrestling before Mid-South, because it's pronounced Duggan, but people call him Duggan, and he gets mad that they mispronounce his name, and that's supposed to somehow make us angry at him for being angry that people are mispronouncing his name. I don't get it.
But now he's a babyface, and we're still doing it.
Yes. I mean, of all the things they do on the show, I mean, were there any spelling errors on the graphics this week? At this point, I'm just numb to it, so I don't even notice. But typically...
Not that I noticed.
Yeah, typically everyone's name is misspelled, so don't worry. By the way, the other thing you need to never happened was Duggan last year was brought in for one night only as an emissary of General Skandor Akbar to go after Dick Murdoch. And you're supposed to not know that because the whole point of this feud is Duggan doesn't like or trust General Skandor Akbar because of his oil business and his dealings with the Iron Sheik.
Wow.
So, yes. So, like I've said before, you never heard me talk about Duggan being associated with General Skandor Akbar last April during the feud with Dick Murdoch. It didn't happen. So, speaking of Hacksaw Duggan, it's Hacksaw Duggan versus Butcher Vachon with General Skandor Akbar, who, as always, is all over every fucking show we do.
Earning his money.
Yes. And Akbar is not afraid at all of Duggan, as long as Duggan is nowhere near the ring. As soon as Duggan got to the apron, Akbar ran for the hills, And it was so noticeable he was running as fast as he can that Boyd brought up that he may have broken a record. Watts talks about Kamala being in Dallas right now. And I wanted to play the audio of the finish here. It's only about 50 seconds. So Duggan is going for the spirit of Vachon, and we're going to pick things up here and play it out.
Spear. Whoa, whoa. Alfredini, watch Akbar from behind. But Duggan saw him. Alfredini was crushed with that spear. Duggan is after Akbar. He's going DiBiase. The big cheese, he's going for the tights to load up the glove, but Duggan caught him before he could load it up. Duggan caught him and it's run him into the turnbuckle. But Akbar, now Vachon gets him behind. Akbar stealing that steel chair, and there's DiBiase. Whoa! You can hear that over here as DiBiase's throwing, but Duggan's going to try to take DiBiase's head off. DiBiase, oh! Duggan is going to get a medal for moving furniture, I can tell you. He's moving furniture like United Van Lines out there.
Alfred Neely back in the ring, but I've had plenty of time to go from here and count him out, Bill.
All right. So the referee, Alfred Neely, of course, standing behind Vachon. So when Duggan spears him, Vachon crashes into Alfred Neely, who falls to the floor. So he conveniently misses DiBiase running in for the brief 2-on-1 advantage. Akbar slides him a chair. DiBiase accidentally hits Vachon with it. Duggan gets it away. DiBiase runs away faster than Akbar ever did. So Duggan turns and hits Butcher in the back with the chair and pins him as Alfred Neely conveniently rolls back in.
I wrote the exact same thing with slightly different wording.
A few less conveniently, huh?
Yeah.
Righty here. So then we go to our final match, our expiration of time match. In reality this week, it is tag team champion Mr. Olympia with General Skandor Akbar versus Jerry Caldwell. Seriously, if I take a drink every time Akbar is on one of these shows, how quickly would I die of alcohol poisoning?
We should try that sometime.
You want me to die while on the show? Do I need to sign? Do I need to sign a living will that gives you like the rights to the show in case I were to die while watching it?
We'll see how it goes.
Sounds good. All right. So Watts continues to talk about everyone wrestling next week. Either there'll be 35 matches next week, or some of these people are wrestling each other. Olympia used a lot of moves and won with the fastest sleeper ever as time ran out on the show. Legit, it was like he was suddenly informed the show only had 10 seconds left, and he was like, oh, fuck, and had to win right now.
Carl Stern's favorite wrestler, Mr. Olympia.
So not Jerry Caldwell?
Dude, I do not know how Carl Stern feels about Jerry Caldwell.
Carl Stern, if you're listening to this right now, and I'm sure you are because the show does 50 or 60,000 listens per month, just ignore the counter on YouTube. You know, I'm sure Carl Stern's one of them. But so that was it for World Class. That's it for Mid-South. So for your first Mid-South, or at least your first Mid-South as part of this new era, what'd you think about the show?
You know, whenever I watch Mid-South, because I watched a little bit of the 81 stuff, Mid-South has been to people in the modern area who are stuck in the past, Mid-South wrestling is this beacon of what wrestling should be. It's like the ideal platonic form of a professional wrestling TV show. And there's just as much inane, idiotic bullshit as there has been on any wrestling show I've ever seen that wasn't booked by Vince Russo.
I mean, that's true. The other thing that a lot of people, especially newer fans, and I mean, this is where talking to you works because you came in during the Attitude Era when there was 1,000 things happening in every segment. So how hard of an adjustment was it, at least the first time you started watching this old wrestling, where we saw a 42-minute show where essentially nothing happened? You know, they built up a little bit with DiBiase and Duggan, and if you know what to look for, they're building up a little bit between Butch Reed and Junkyard Dog. But other than that, essentially nothing happened. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't call this a great, memorable show you have to go watch. But I would say overall this was a good show.
Yeah, so I watch a lot of wrestling and I watch a lot of different wrestling. I watch pretty much every New Japan Road 2 show, so I love shows where nothing happens. This was this was right up my alley. It was it's interesting to watch because like I said, I feel a cultural connection to Mid South. So it's interesting to see and just kind of understand. It's just cool for me to see the wrestling that people were watching where I lived before I was born.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you don't want to share, that's fine, but how old are you?
30, I'm getting to the age where I have to think about it. 36. I was born in 1987. So toward the very end of the territory era.
So I'm still the old hag on these shows because I'm 39. But we are closer to my date of birth than yours. But so we leave Mid-South, we head one state over to Texas, to the Sportatorium for World Class Championship Wrestling, also May 21st, 1983. And Bill Mercer is on vacation this week, and actually he's at his daughter's graduation. So, oh boy, if you ever thought Bill Mercer sucked, sitting in for him today is Mark Lawrence. And Mark, let's just hope in the future he sticks to being the ring announcer. But let's go to the intro of the show.
World Class Championship Wrestling from the Sportatorium is on the air. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Lawrence, sitting in for Bill Mercer tonight, who is with the graduation of his daughter. Congratulations there. We're glad you're with us. We want to talk about Kevin Von Erich now right away, the man who faced Ric Flair at State Fair Coliseum. There's the big dive taking Flair down. Kevin Von Erich will be involved in our main event tonight. He'll go against Terry Gordy. And there's Gordy himself right there in action outside the ring. So, a big main event tonight as we have a fabulous show for you. Our first bout will be Yatsu versus Vachon. And that's just a part of the spectacular action that you'll be seeing here tonight. A big crowd is on hand, and we'll be back for it all when world-class wrestling from the Sportatorium continues in just a moment.
So, in a lot of ways, Bill Mercer not being here is like, I don't know, if Boyd Pierce ever wasn't on, Mid-South. It's not like the greatest commentary of all time, but it's just completely different when he's not here. And in this case, we filled in with Mark Lawrence, who's the normal ring announcer. And, he's not the greatest ring announcer in the world, and he's definitely not the greatest commentator in the world either.
I have never seen an episode of Mid-South before, and I didn't even realize that wasn't the regular guy.
Well, that's great since this was world class.
What did I say?
Mid-South.
Damn it. You know what I meant.
It's all good. Lord knows I've made a mistake or two in my life. But so today, the main event, Kevin Von Erich versus Terry Gordy. But we're going to go to the ring for our opener, which is good old Butcher Vachon versus Tola Yatsu with Armand Hussein. Since Mark Lawrence is doing commentary, someone else has got to be the announcer, and stepping in is someone named Joe Ranelli, whoever that is. I will say that while not a fan of the duo this week, I will appreciate them making sure to use someone other than Lawrence, and he wasn't just doing commentary like from the ring and then doing obviously voiced over commentary. Like, it shows attention to detail. So Tola Yatsu has his pre-match ceremony where the bell rings, and this happens every time. The bell rings, and then the opponent politely stands off to the side while Yatsu does his pre-match sumo ritual. Lawrence tried to say the bell rang twice. It didn't. And Lawrence killed time while talking about the upcoming Greatest International Star Wars card, which, as we noted 2 weeks ago, was in about 60 days. So now that it's 2 weeks later, we're in about 46 days. And then he talks about how the American title, which is on the line in the main event, is the second most prestigious belt in the world behind the NWA World title, which every territory you will ever watch will say that their belt is either the most important or the second most important behind the NWA World title. What is the most important? What is the second most important? That's for you to decide. Vachon, by the way, was polite enough to allow Yatsu his time to do his pre-match ritual, and that was the best 3 minutes of the match, I thought. Yatsu won in about a total of 5 minutes with actually a really nice snap power slam. So maybe I shouldn't have been so mean about what the best part of the match was.
Yeah, they did not make contact until the 2 minute and 30-second mark. And then the match ended in 3 minutes and 58 seconds. I was kind of interested. Toriatsu is Yoshiaki Yatsu, who was a famous Japanese amateur wrestler who competed in the 1976 Olympics, would have competed in the 1980 Olympics, but Japan participated in the U.S.-led boycott of the Moscow Games that year. And he ended up having a significant pro wrestling career in All Japan in the 80s, SWS, and kind of all over the Japanese wrestling scene. Apparently still doing the occasional match to this day.
Nice. And the funny thing is, like, and maybe it's not. Maybe Armand Hussein actually is a babyface, and he's just the worst babyface manager I've ever seen because he's a heel. Like, I can't believe he would not be a heel, but he's feuding with Akbar, who's definitely a heel, and it's just a kind of a funny feud when you consider that, because it's 1983, so you didn't see a lot of face versus face or heel versus heel stuff, but this feud's been going on since we began doing World Class about 3 months ago, and we may be coming to an end here, because let's go to Mark Lawrence for a quick interview with Armand Hussein.
Armand Hussein and Toriatsu, where Yatsu has just won yet another bout. But Armand Hussein, it is Kamala, the Ugandan giant, that I want to ask you about now.
Well, I want to tell you something in the world at large out there. I underestimated the Ugandan giant and Skandor Akbar and his associates, which is Devastation Incorporated. I want to say one thing to you. It would lower my dignity of man of my integrity and ability and pride. Do you know that Akbar has said that he wants me and the great Kamala? And along with Tola Yatsu and me are against Kamala. There's no way he could ever win.
Okay, the thoughts of Armand Hussein. Yatsu victorious, and Hussein is ready to go with Yatsu against Kamala. We'll be back to see Chris Adams and the Mongol as from the Sportatorium.
Now, I probably should have looked this up, but I don't know if Armand Hussein was ever actually a wrestler, or if he was just, a manager extraordinaire at all times. So, who knows? Like, him in the ring with Yatsu versus Kamala, I'd say this is a way for, Yatsu to lose without getting pinned, except we have seen Yatsu do the JOB before on this show. So I don't know, it's kind of a weird way to protect him if that's what they're doing.
I was very confused by this. I had the same questions you did. I actually had a note here to ask you who were supposed to be the baby faces and heels in this feud, because I had no idea. I have never heard of Armand Hussein before this. I assume based on the name that he's supposed to be from one of the Muslim parts of Africa, but his accent says every Southern black man I've ever met.
So let's see here. According to MemphisWrestling.fandom.com, Armand Hussein, who passed away in 2007, wrestled in Memphis in 1977, and he was billed as the African heavyweight champion from Sudan. And let's hear. It says he performed a ritual in the ring before matches that was described as a camel walk. Okay. I'm not even. Yeah.
It's such a shame that we don't have that Memphis TV footage.
Sadly, no. It's like, unfortunately, especially before 81, it's really spotty. And
yeah.
Memphis is on the list of things I'd like to one day do, but that would also require me to do 18 shows a week, which, I'm certainly not prepared to do 18 shows a week. It's like, honestly, in a perfect world, I'd love to just watch as much territory stuff as I can from the same day or same weekend, and then review it all just to see how it all compares. But again, I'd have to watch, 18 shows a week. And even I don't have that level of a life.
I'm honestly really tempted to also watch Mid-Atlantic and Memphis and and whatever else I can find from the stage, because that's also the way that my brain works.
Hey, I mean, I've only got, almost 3 years left of Smoky Mountain, so maybe when that ends, might have to sneak in some Memphis or, something else there. But up next, we get the match 3 weeks in the making. Chris Adams versus the Mongol with, of course, General Skandor Akbar in his corner. It's like I couldn't have picked two better territories to, be reviewing at the same time because it's just Akbar all over both shows. And it's like, I'm not an Akbar hater, but then you get weeks like this where he's just like, it's nonstop Akbar, you know.
Total
And
nonstop Akbar.
yes, it's a different TNA. So Adams has been building up this match since the moment he walked in the door, since that really awful promo he cut like 3 weeks ago, where he talked about what a great country Texas was. He was calling out the Mongol, and he reiterated that last week. And next week, they announced that they were going to have a tremendous 6-man tag. And this is where I got a little confused. That got cleared up later. But they said we're going to have a tremendous 6-man tag, and also talked about Ric Flair and Kevin Von Erich. So I thought they were going to be in the tremendous 6-man tag. Well, we find out later. We find out later that they're not going to be in the tremendous 6-man tag. Lawrence says that Mongol is the person that Akbar sends out when they want to win matches. This is the same Akbar who manages Kamala, who never gets pinned on any of these shows. And I'll be honest, this is one of those matches where I watch and I think people actually thought that this was real. Like, Mongol, like, okay, I think at this point, anybody listening to this knows the quote-unquote secret of throwing a strike in wrestling. You stomp your foot to make the noise. And Mongol was taking the biggest stomps you've ever seen, and was painfully obvious that's where any noise was coming from. Lawrence at one point calls Mongol Vashon and doesn't even catch himself on it. Mongol knocks Adams out of the ring and won't let him back in. So Adams stopped trying to get back in, which led to Mongol coming out and getting super kicked in the mush. Adams breaks out a suicide dive, which while we do see them about once a month, it's still a rare occurrence to see somebody dive out of the ring, in 1983. The super kick party breaks out back in the ring. Mongol then ducks a diving Adams, and he was hung on the top rope. Mongol, who was put in the ring to win matches, then got himself intentionally disqualified for choking Adams past the count of 5. Adams fought back and sent Mongol packing with an enziguri, and this feud must continue.
At least we got to see that very cool Tope Suicida here in 1983.
Yes. About 3 or 4 months ago, Hector Guerrero broke one out on Mid-South, and Bill Watts may still be marking out to this day in 2024.
Hey man, between Chris Adams, the Von Erichs, mentions of Grizzly Smith on Mid-South, Terry Gordy, there was a lot of Dark Side of the Ring happening on these shows.
And wait till we discuss Smoky Mountain, because not so much what happens in Smoky Mountain, but at the end of the show, we talk about what else is happening in the world of wrestling. And there's a major moment this week in the world of wrestling we'll be talking about on the Smoky Mountain show.
Here.
So gorgeous Jim Garvin with Sunshine versus Johnny Mantell. I wouldn't even bother playing this audio, but we haven't had much audio this week, and this is the last bit of audio I'm going to be playing. So let's go to Jimmy Garvin, who's going to be taking the microphone to make an important announcement.
I got an important announcement. Let me have your attention, please. David Von Erich, I know you can hear my voice now. I know you can hear me. And David Von Erich, anytime, any place, any kind of a match, Gorgeous Jimmy will be more than happy to beat you up.
So the important announcement was last week's important announcement, where Garvin is calling out David Von Erich, which is a feud that has been going on since, again, we started discussing this. Garvin beat David for the Texas title on TV and then lost it off TV. And, it may have aired on the Fort Worth show because this World Class show we're doing is a syndicated show that got syndicated in different parts of the country and the world, where the Fort Worth show, which was 2 hours on Saturday night, was just in the Fort Worth, Dallas area. And that may have been where David won the belt back, but we'll never see it, so we don't know. Anyway, here, I'll read you all the highlights of this match. They exchange hammerlocks. At one point, when Garvin does a head scissors takeover, he yells at the camera, "I'm good." And
Yes.
At about the 5-minute mark, we got a knee lift, and the finish was Garvin catching Mantell and dropping him with a backbreaker for the win. And after the match, I'm sorry, go ahead.
As Lawrence called it, an atomic back-breaking knee drop.
Yes, good old Mark Lawrence. And it's hilarious. Like, all the names of moves we get during these shows, that it's like, it's not what it's ever called in modern day. But, hey, I mean, they didn't really do reshooting of audio. So it's like, this is mostly like as they're watching it. So it's like, you kind of get to give it that, as opposed to like 2024, where if you get a pre-taped show like this and he fucks up the name or you don't know the name of it, you press stop on the recording, you find out what the hell it's called, and then press record again. So sometimes you got to give the announcers a little bit of leeway with shit like this. Go ahead.
I met Johnny Mantell in about 2016, and I had no idea who he was. So I was surprised to see that he was like over enough as a baby face to be signing autographs before the match. It was I happened to be up in Wichita Falls, Texas, where at the time he was running the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and I looked it up today, and that closed in 2020 and has never reopened.
That sucks.
One more thing I want to note. They noted during this match that Jumbo Tsuruta would defend the United National title at the upcoming Star Wars, and also appearing will be Giant Baba, quote, the Oriental Andre the Giant.
Yes, they mentioned Baba last week. Tsuruta was a new announcement for this week. So they've been doing that where they're just announcing new people each week. I do want to note, though, like, I'm not saying Mantell wasn't over to some degree, but you see that a lot with almost every match where fans will flock around the babyface to get autographs and whatnot. And it's one of those things that's like, it makes like, it kind of like makes every scene or every start of the match chaotic, because not only do you have the wrestlers in the ring, you have whatever valets they have, plus you have multiple cameramen, multiple audio people, and then you have like a corner that'll be full of fans, begging for autographs. It's like, it's really cool and really different. Like, can you imagine what would happen if somebody even attempted to get an autograph during the intro of a match nowadays?
They would be probably beaten by security.
Yes, they would. Yes, they would. But, so yeah, and by the way, next week we found out the 6-man tag is the Freebirds versus Kevin Von Erich, David Von Erich, and Iceman Parsons. And then we'll get a tape of Flair versus Kevin. So, there you go. Now,
so I'm getting hyped for this Star Wars show, and I was just looking, and it appears that we do have that available. So we might have to do a special on that card.
We might have to drop a bonus show. I do want to make sure that they're not just airing. I mean, I guess if they do, we can always just cut up Star Wars into parts and watch it as we go along. I wanted to make sure that it's not just going to be like the next 4 episodes of World Class when we get to the end of June. And this way, then we're just sitting here with our thumbs up our ass while, for those 4 weeks. But, if we'll get to that eventually, I'm sure. And I do want to point out, we've mentioned this before, and this is one of the things that I've mentioned that I really like about old school wrestling. They're territories. They're not going to have 100 people under contract. You have about 10 to 15 full-timers, and you have your jobber crew, which, depends. Some of them work more often than others. But anyway, one of the things that they do that I love is that everyone has their own feud. The Freebirds are feuding with the Von Erichs. However, everybody has friends, and those friends are all linked together in some ways. So you don't have to do the Freebirds versus the Von Erichs every week to continue the Freebirds versus Von Erichs feud. We've had Iceman Parsons, we've had Chavo Guerrero, and it's like, oh, here's a continuation of Freebirds versus Von Erichs, but it's Chavo Guerrero versus, Jimmy Garvin, because Jimmy Garvin's, linked to some degree with the Freebirds. And it's something you don't see nowadays, because nowadays, if you just did a random 15-minute match between two people who aren't really feuding, it's like, well, this is a waste of time. Whereas now you watch back in 83, 84, it's like, holy crap, this is like a continuation of the overarching feud of the company. And Mid-South does a great job with it too. And yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
I appreciate AEW is typically pretty good about people having friends. It's like I watch a lot of New Japan, and like sometimes you got somebody who is a part of a faction that's just getting their ass beat for minutes on end and nobody bothers to save them. So, very hit or miss in modern wrestling. So it's nice. It's nice that people have friends.
the House of Torture is not going to be interfering in any of these matches.
Oh my God, I've had enough of that.
By the way, to plug one of the bonus shows I did the top 7 most random pandemic pushes, and number 1 was IWGP champion Evil, which I still can't fucking believe he won the IWGP title.
I was not against them trying something with him. What I was against was them continuing to try it with him for the past 4 years.
But in many ways, and this isn't a really a fair comparison, and now I've taken this off on a rant here, but in many ways, he's the New Japan Jinder Mahal. He never really did anything, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he wins the title. Now, unlike Jinder, the whole point of it was, well, we want to push somebody new. And honestly, I think Zack Sabre Jr. was going to get the title, but he couldn't get into the country due to COVID. And so when they go down the list of people, Evil was the next new person that they had. And by new, I mean somebody hadn't been champion already. And I respect them trying something new, but it was like they immediately realized what a failure it was, because they took the belt off of him almost as soon as they put it on him. And then he never really has gotten anywhere close to it since. He's had title matches because he's got that, title of former IWGP champion, but nobody in their right mind thinks he's ever going to, win.
A few weeks ago, when people were up in arms about Powerhouse Hobbs getting a shot at the IWGP title, I pointed out Evil has challenged for that belt twice, and it's about to be 3 times because he's wrestling Jon Moxley at Dominion. Just a minor correction. Zach was actually in Japan for all of COVID. He never left. I don't know what the original idea was. I think I may have remembered hearing at the time that they were kind of planning on doing something with Evil that year. I don't know how much COVID really affected those plans. But they did figure out pretty quickly that it didn't work, and then they just keep on doing it even though it doesn't working. But we're way out into the wilds now. This has nothing to do with World Class in 1983.
I mean, I spend all the time talking about how they don't necessarily have to do Freebirds versus Von Erichs every week, and the main event is American champion Kevin Von Erich versus Terry Gordy, which is definitely not Von Erichs versus Freebirds. Yeah. So, to the shock of approximately nobody, the girls screeched for Kevin's introduction. I felt they made a mistake by showing a close-up of the belt, which in my opinion just shows that they've just used the same title belt over and over again, because it just has the deliberately vague world-class heavyweight wrestling champion on the front. And so they pretty much only have one belt that everybody goes out with. And I was actually at an indie show one time where every match was a title match, but it was obvious they only had 2 belts that just kept being switched out for every match, because they did a tag team title match, and the 2 belts were these 2 flagrantly different belts. It was like, okay, so like we're not even trying here, right?
It couldn't even get the WWE shop replicas.
No, this was it was a title belt that I'd always seen in magazines. It was like the independent wrestling title belt that had a weird picture of a globe on the front. That was
Yeah.
one of them. And I think the other one was one of those mock WCW US title belts that Larry Zbyszko always had during his indie matches. Um, and let's see here. By the way, just the intensity of both men. This is the best match we've seen since the Flair Kevin match a month ago. Like,
This match ruled.
yeah, they were in a side headlock, a side fucking headlock.
Yes.
And both
Yes.
men are selling this to the nth degree. And unlike the Mongol versus Chris Adams from earlier, this match, as I hit my microphone, is an example of why people thought wrestling was real. This looked like an actual fight, one that ebbed and flowed, and both men used their own technique and momentum to be in control at different points. They traded sleeper holds, which to me looked backwards since Kevin got it on first, and then Gordy, the heel, reversed it and put one on himself. But anyway, neither man got the win with it. Kevin ducked a Gordy crossbody from the middle rope and hit one of his own from the top rope for the shockingly clean win. Because we do not get many clean, decisive wins in the main events, and usually when we do, it just leads to a post-match attack. So this was different.
Man, the way that this crowd cheered Kevin on as he was trying to grind away with the body scissors. Like, just the way people used to react to wrestling. Women screamed when this man applied an abdominal stretch.
Yeah.
And the claw is the silliest fucking thing, but it's so insanely over. And the way Gordy was holding Kevin's arm back to keep him from applying the claw, like his life depended on it. I don't want to shock any of our listeners, but Terry Gordy, really good pro wrestler.
Terry Gordy was very good at pro wrestling, and he's just going to get better. You know, he's going to get worse eventually, but he gets better from here even.
Yeah, he hasn't even started working All Japan yet.
Now, I'm not going to bother playing it because his part went like 10 seconds, but the show ends with what is theoretically an interview with Kevin Von Erich. He vows to win the world title from Flair, and Mark Lawrence, being the great commentator and interviewer he is, pulls the mic away from him to show a replay of the finish and plug next week's show. But he does give us really good news. Bill Mercer is going to be back next week. Hallelujah! And that brought the show to its conclusion.
And what a conclusion it was.
It's better than last week, because last week, Bill Mercer had 5 minutes to kill, and normally it's like this. They bring in one of the proponents of the main event, or they'll bring in somebody involved in next week's show, and they'll cut a promo or whatever. And so it's like, okay, I was waiting, because there's like 5 minutes left in the show, so I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and it is 40 years later, and I'm still waiting for that end of the show promo from last week. It was just Mercer talking for 5 minutes. It was hilarious.
So we watched Mid-South and World Class, and we also watched Smoky Mountain for the other show we're going to do. And this was the best match on any of the shows.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Smoky Mountain, let me go through it. Yeah, they're really, like, I mean, depending on your own taste, you know, I mean, even that, the Tracy Smothers versus Night Stalker, I wouldn't, you know, give that a win there over that.
I really liked the opener on the Smoky Mountain show, but we'll get to that.
Yes. So, by the way, listen to the Smoky Mountain show that's going to come out, tomorrow as you're all listening to this. But that's going to do it here for something else. Something else number 094. Insert witty subtitle that I'll make up later here. And Trae, you made it through your first episode. How do you feel?
Never been so excited in my life.
Are you excited because it's over, or are you excited because you enjoyed doing the show?
A little bit of both.
Okay, great. By the way, the show went, I mean, I don't time them, but it went approximately 65 minutes, and it took me until a minute ago to say your name a single time. I don't know if you noticed or not, but yeah. But
I don't think I said your name a single time.
It's Aria, by the way.
I know.
We just found each other on the street, and somehow, despite the fact that he lives in Texas and I live in Massachusetts, we found each other on the street.
Well, we met 10 years ago, but you don't remember it.
I'm sorry. That show was the last appearance of Ultimate Warrior before he died.
Oh well, I can understand why I faded from your memory.
I'll fade away and classify myself as obsolete.
Delete.
Delete. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's episode of Something Else. I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'll talk to you again in 7 days.